How's it going? Welcome back to another Artistry Ignited Nature Tour. As you can see here, I've just got my terrarium collection, which I've actually just relocated back out here next to Cozzy's tank. Just thought I'd take you through on a basic terrarium build, or how I like to do it. I like building these things because they're very low maintenance and they just tend to sort of set and forget, if you know what I mean. You just build them and add the perfect amount of substrate and not too much water, or not too little water, and they tend to just sustain themselves. So what I'm going to show you is just the basis on how to build one, how to just sort of set it up and let it thrive. I'll take you through and we'll have a look. What I figured we'd use is maybe not such big a jar this time. I'll try this old little coffee jar. These jars are quite good for making terrariums because they're very easy to work with, and they have, sort of as you can see, they have a nice seal that's already on there. So we'll use this one for this build. And so what we got here, a jar that we'll build the terrarium in, a little bit of potting mix. We've got some riverbed gravel here, and some of these nice little grey slate looking stones, and a little bit of activated carbon, which sort of helps in the filtration cycle of water evaporation in terrariums, because as the water evaporates, and it goes up to the top and then rains back down like a cloud, and then when it sinks through the substrate, the plants get nutrients causing them to grow, and any excess goes down to the filtration layer in the bottom. So what we'll do, we'll just pour the carbon in the bottom there. And then what I'm going to do is use some of this riverbed gravel just to mix in with the carbon, just so you get like a nice even filtration layer, as well as a dense filtration layer, but with still the ability of the drainage moisture to move around and absorb into the carbon. And what we got here is a bit of this netting, which I've used outside on the ponds to stop birds getting in the ponds. In this case, I like to use these in terrariums. They actually work just as good as fly screens. The only thing I don't like about this particular one is it's white, but over time, as the terrarium establishes, it will get dirty and you will not see it. So I just like to fold it a couple of times, tuck it down the bottom there like that, just so it's out of sight. And then once you get your potting mix in there, it will sort of cover it up a bit. Push that down flat, and then you get a nice even layer. The netting does stand out, but as you flatten it down and even it out, it is not so noticeable over time. And also as the netting gets dirty, it is not noticeable, as terrariums establish, microorganisms go through their feeding cycles and all that, and then that produces a bit of waste like any ecosystem, and then it will hide it. Preferably a black netting or a black fly screen would look better, but this is a cheap build, so we use what we got here. This is just a bit of dechlorinated water. I like to just moisten the substrate up a bit, as well as it acts as the starting ground for the terrarium cycle, and that just, the moisture in the potting mix just allows you to compact it down a little bit more. Now what I have here is some moss, which I've just found out in the yard, in the backyard, under a tree, and it was just growing on some old bits of bark and that, so I leave this in here just so it can grow on its own, and it's been fine. It's got its own little cycle in there. It's growing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit out, and I want to get a bit of this bark and break some off and sort of have it as a feature in this little terrarium. And no doubt this moss has living things in it as well. But we'll get some out of here and we'll break a bit off, and that can be our starting canvas to work on. Like that bit there. So the idea is we'll just get it in there, press it up against the back like that. Remember, I'm not an expert terrarium scaper. Terrariums are something I've not done all my life, so please forgive me for my lack of aquascaping skills. So this has moss on it too, but we'll just break it up a bit, break up that bark there a bit. This is another jar which I use for random terrarium assortments. Mainly moss and bark and leaf litter which I've accumulated in there, but I never actually thought it would grow without adding a drainage layer, but it seems to be fine. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab some of this moss here, and this moss here will serve as the main feature. But I don't want to, I just want to grab a little bit, not the entire amount. This is rather a very fluffy looking moss. I'm not real knowledgeable on mosses, but comment below what sort of moss this is if you know. I quite like it. I've used it in a number of my terrarium builds. So I'll just grab it here. Just put it sort of down at the side there. That way it can grow in the centre, sort of near the centre. Because what I'm going to do is put a few rocks in the side there. And I'm going to use some of these stones here, which I will just place on the bottom here. These are just rocks that you can get from your local $2 shops, craft shops and that. They're very handy for terrariums. I'm not entirely sure if these are aquarium safe, but I've never had a problem with them in terrariums, and they've actually worked quite well. And once they get a bit of moisture on them through the humidity environment or humid environments in terrariums, they actually look really shiny and they sort of appeal nicely in there. So this terrarium here, we're not going to have many plants in here, just moss and a substrate with moisture, because a lot of these mosses that you find out in the wild, or ones that you may even purchase online, already have microorganisms in here. One thing I do recommend with terrariums is the introduction of springtails. They help balance the ecosystem, they help it cycle a lot better because they eat all of the leaf litter that comes from plants in your terrariums, as well as moss leaf litter. I haven't got some for this build, but one of my other build videos I'm planning to introduce springtails and show you how to do that. But yeah, this is just a really basic terrarium, which would cost you nothing at all, just materials that you have, and just stuff that lies around your yard. Very easy to build, very simple, and as you can see, that netting there, it's not so noticeable once you squash it down. But yeah, it's a very basic terrarium. 2 different breeds of moss, some rocky substrate, which you just place in there. And try to always press it down a bit just so it holds. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to blend in some of these finer bits of gravel here, just to sort of give it like a nature, more of a natural look, that's the word I was looking for. And some of these brown rocks sort of give it a nice little pattern with those grey ones too. This terrarium here will just give it a bit more moisture. That's pretty much it. And you close the lid. It's a self-sealing lid, and we'll put it under the appropriate lighting and we'll have a look at it. As you can see, it's come out all right. Aquascaping wise, it's not the neatest, but if you're starting out learning terrariums and you just want to build something basic without spending a lot of money, something like this would do the job fine. Even if you just get to come home and watch moss grow, it might seem to be, you know, rather a very basic terrarium of just moss, but it works. It's very easy to build. And sort of just looking at the grey stones in there with that riverbed, real fine riverbed gravel, it's blended in quite nice. Yes, there is definitely room for improvement. I'm not the most expert on making terrarium scapes, or any aquascapes for that matter, but I enjoy this hobby and I'm willing to get better at it. For the time being, this terrarium will live with the rest of my established projects that I've made, terrariums that I've made, and just left sitting here to grow. Thank you for watching and hear me waffle on this time about terrariums. This is Artistry Ignited. Tune in again soon.